The night air was thick with tension as 16-year-old Maya walked home from the corner store, earbuds in, lost in her own world. She didn't see the patrol car creeping up behind her. She didn't hear the officer step out, boots heavy against the pavement. But she felt his presence the moment he grabbed her arm. "Where you headed?" The cop asked, his tone sharp, his grip unrelenting. Maya froze, heart pounding. "Home," she managed, trying to pull away. But the officer wasn't interested in letting her go. His eyes scanned her like she was guilty of something, though she had done nothing wrong. Then, without warning, she felt it. A searing pain against her arm. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the air. Maya screamed, jerking away, eyes wide with shock. A cigarette. His cigarette. Pressed against her skin. Tears blurred her vision as she clutched her arm, her body trembling. "Why are you doing this?" She choked out, voice barely above a whisper. Before the officer could say another word, tires screeched to a halt a few feet away. A car door slammed. A deep voice cut through the night like a blade. "Get your hands off my daughter." Maya turned, relief flooding through her. Her father, and not just any father, a lawyer, and he was here to fight. The officer straightened up, his fingers twitching near his belt. His gaze flickered between Maya and the man now standing just feet away, radiating calm fury. Maya's father, James Carter, was no stranger to moments like this. As a defense attorney, he had spent years fighting cases just like the one unfolding before him. But this wasn't some stranger's story. This was his daughter, and that changed everything. James locked eyes with the officer, his voice steady but sharp. "What's your badge number?" The cop hesitated. The streetlights overhead cast a shadow across his face, but Maya could see it. The slight shift in his expression, the realization that he might have just made a mistake. Still, he squared his shoulders. She looked suspicious, he said, his voice defensive. "I was just checking things out." James took a step closer. "And in what world does checking things out involve burning a child?" His voice was low, controlled, but the weight behind his words was impossible to ignore. Maya clutched her arm, the sting still fresh. The pain didn't just come from the burn, but from something deeper. She had heard stories like this. She had seen the headlines, but she never thought she'd be living it. The officer opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, James pulled out his phone and hit record. The officer's jaw tightened as the red recording light on James's phone glowed between them. His hand hovered near his radio, but he didn't speak into it. Maya could see the wheels turning in his head. Was he about to double down or back off? "I need you to step back, sir," the cop finally said, his tone firm but uneasy. "You're interfering with." "With what?" James cut in, his voice unwavering. "An unlawful stop, an assault on a minor. My daughter, who was walking home, minding her own business." He shifted slightly, angling the phone to make sure every word, every movement was caught on camera. "This is harassment. This is abuse of power. And I promise you, officer, this isn't going away." Maya's hand shook, but not just from fear anymore. A slow burn of anger spread through her chest. She had spent her whole life hearing her father talk about justice, about rights, about fighting back the right way. But standing here, face to face with someone who had hurt her just because he could, the idea of the right way felt impossibly far away. The cop exhaled sharply, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Maya saw it, the flicker of doubt, of worry. He wasn't used to being challenged like this. Not in real time, not with evidence. Then from the patrol car, a voice crackled over the radio. Another officer was on the way. James didn't move. He held his phone steady, his expression unreadable. Maya could feel the tension thick in the air, pressing down on her like a weight. The officer shifted again, his fingers twitching near his belt, his face tight with frustration. The distant hum of an approaching siren sent a chill through her. Reinforcements. But for who? Maya swallowed hard. Would another cop show up and make this worse? Would they back up their own, twist the story, turn her father into the aggressor? Her mind raced through the possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. The officer's radio crackled again, something about backup being minutes away. James didn't flinch. "You're done here," he said, his voice cool but commanding. "Step away from my daughter." The officer hesitated, his jaw clenching. His eyes flicked to Maya's arm, where the burn still glowed angry and red. The evidence of what he had done. James caught it too. "Oh, don't worry," he said, almost reading the cop's mind. "This is going on record. The department, the courts, and the public." Maya saw it then, that moment of realization in the officer's face. He wasn't in control anymore. The power had shifted. But just as she felt a flicker of hope, the siren wailed louder, and flashing blue lights flooded the street. The patrol car screeched to a stop, red and blue lights bouncing off the buildings. Maya's breath caught as the door swung open, and another officer stepped out, a tall, broad man with a hardened expression. His badge glinted under the streetlights as he took in the scene. His gaze landed on James, then flicked to the officer standing by Maya. "What's going on here?" the new officer asked, voice sharp, authoritative. Before James could respond, the first cop jumped in. "I had to detain her," he said quickly, the edge of nerves in his tone betraying his confidence. "She was acting suspicious. When I tried to question her, her father got aggressive." Maya's stomach twisted. She had seen this before. Twisted stories. Lies. The way the truth got buried under authority. James took a deep breath, keeping his composure. "I have the entire incident on video," he said, lifting his phone slightly. "My daughter was walking home. Your officer stopped her without cause. And then he motioned toward Maya's arm. He assaulted her." The new officer's eyes darkened as they settled on the burn mark. For a moment, it seemed like he might take James's words seriously. But then something changed. His jaw tightened. "Sir, I need you to put the phone down," he said, stepping closer. "Let's handle this the right way." James let out a dry laugh. "The right way? That's exactly what I intend to do." The second officer reached for his radio, speaking into it in a low voice. Maya felt her pulse skyrocket. Were they going to arrest her father? Cover this up? The weight of helplessness pressed against her chest. Then, before anyone could react, a voice rang out from down the street. "James." Everyone turned. A woman in a sharp navy suit was walking toward them, her heels clicking against the pavement with purpose. Maya's eyes widened as she recognized her, a family friend. A prosecutor, and she did not look happy. The moment the prosecutor reached them, the energy on the street shifted. The second officer stiffened, his hand lowering from his radio. Even the first cop, the one who had hurt Maya, took a small step back. "James, what's going on?" she asked, eyes flicking between him, Maya, and the officers. But as soon as she spotted the burn on Maya's arm, her expression darkened. "This officer stopped my daughter without cause," James said, keeping his voice steady. "Then he assaulted her. I have it all on video." The prosecutor turned to the first cop, her sharp gaze pinning him in place. "Is that true?" The officer swallowed hard. "She was acting suspicious," he muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. The prosecutor folded her arms. "That's not what I asked." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then the second officer cleared his throat. Look, we can sort this out at the station. No need to escalate things here. Maya felt her father tense beside her, but before he could speak, the prosecutor shook her head. No, we're handling this now. She turned back to James. Send me the video. The officer who had burned Maya took a deep breath, his face pale under the flashing lights. He looked at the prosecutor, then at James, then at Maya. He hesitated. I made a mistake. Maya's breath hitched. She hadn't expected that. James narrowed his eyes. A mistake? The officer nodded, glancing around as if searching for a way out. I shouldn't have done that, he admitted. His voice was quieter now, the arrogance gone. I wasn't thinking. Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this guilt, or just fear? But before she could process it, the prosecutor spoke again. You're going to turn in your badge, she said firmly. Tonight. The officer looked like he wanted to argue. But he didn't. He just exhaled sharply and gave a single nod. Maya's heart pounded. Just like that. Could it really be over? James didn't lower his phone. And the charges. He pressed. The prosecutor nodded. Leave that to me. Maya let out a shaky breath, but just as relief started to settle in, the second officer's radio crackled again. Dispatch to Unit 7. Officer needs assistance. Suspect fled the scene. The second officer's face twisted with frustration. He lifted the radio to respond, but his partner, the one who had hurt Maya, was already walking toward his car. Not in handcuffs. Not under arrest. Just leaving. Maya's stomach dropped. She turned to James, who was still recording. Dad. I know, he said, his voice unreadable. This isn't over. And as she watched the officer disappear into the night, she knew he was right. Maya watched the officer drive away, a knot tightening in her chest. He might have admitted what he did, but that didn't feel like justice. Not yet. James finally lowered his phone, exhaling slowly. The prosecutor touched his arm. We'll push this forward, she assured him. Internal affairs will have to investigate. The department can't ignore this. Maya wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that everything her father had fought for, everything he had taught her about standing up, about the law, about truth, would win in the end. But she also knew how many times stories like hers had been buried. How many times the system had looked the other way. James turned to her, his face softening. Are you okay? She hesitated, then nodded. I think so. He gave her a long look, as if he could see every emotion swirling inside her. Then he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. This isn't over, he said again, his voice steady. And we're not letting this go. Maya leaned into him, letting out a slow breath. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing for sure. Her father wasn't just a lawyer. He was her shield. And no matter how long it took, the fight for justice wasn't ending tonight. It was only beginning.